This week, we're joined by Laura Jones, a risk strategist by day, international speaker, entrepreneur, and CEO and founder of a company called Stimulate Minds, which produces a series of books aimed at introducing young people to cybersecurity, and technology. In our second segment, we'll cover the security and compliance news of the week, including Equifax's historic breach settlement, which is just around the corner, how hidden complexity is the biggest threat to compliance, and how corporate compliance efforts count, but all this and more. So join us as we tear down silos and build bridges on Security and Compliance Weekly.
This is a Security Weekly production. And now, it's the show that bridges the requirements of regulations, compliance, and privacy with those of security. Your trusted source for complying with various mandates, building effective programs, and current compliance news. It's time for Security and Compliance Weekly. Today's organizations face an evolving set of security threats and continually changing compliance requirements. As your business grows, privacy concerns only multiply and add to a dynamic set of priorities. Today's organizations need to integrate risk, security, and privacy into a cohesive program. Online Business Systems team of seasoned security practitioners work closely with you to assess your security posture, policies, procedures, and technologies, providing tailored solutions that are specifically aligned to your business's risk profile and ultimately ensure the protection of your brand. To learn more about Online Business Systems, go to securityweekly.com/online.
Welcome to episode number 10 of Security and Compliance Weekly, recorded on December 10th, 2019. I'm your host, Mr. Jeff Mann, coming to you from Pasadena, Maryland, along with my co-host, also from, what do you call it, Gambrels, Maryland, Scott?
Yeah, Gambrels, Odenton, but holy cow, episode 10! What are we
Episode
thinking?
10! It's crazy. Hey, today we're going to go chat with a woman named Laura Jones and talk about how she is tackling not only the skills gap in cyber and tech, but also the lack of diversity that's common in our field. Before we jump into that, I do have a couple announcements. First, just around the corner, InfoSec World 2020, which will be March 30th through April 1st at the Disney Contemporary Resort. We want you to join us. Security Weekly listeners can receive a 15% discount off the InfoSec World main conference or the World Pass. To take advantage of that offer, visit our website, securityweekly.com/ISW, India Sierra Whiskey 2020, and click the register button to register with our discount code. Also, it's only a week away now. Next week, Security Weekly will be hosting our holiday extravaganza. On December 19th, we are going to be live streaming 5 one-hour panel discussions with some of the most knowledgeable professionals in our industry. Also, to round out the evening, Ed Scotus is going to be joining us to give his annual announcement about the Counter Hack Holiday Hack Challenge. You can join us by watching us on the live stream on YouTube channel or on our securityweekly.com/live website. So we hope to see you there listening to us and watching us. All right, let's jump into it. Our guest today is Laura Jones. Laura is a risk strategist by day, but she's also an author, a speaker, and founder and CEO of a company called Stimulate Minds. And in chatting with her last week, preparing for this call, I found that she's a passionate person, not only about educating young people about careers in cyber and tech, but also taking on the lack of diversity that's in our industry. And I think we'll find out it's more than just our industry, but specifically the lack of diversity in terms of African Americans in the corporate environment and in cyber and tech in particular. She has sort of a unique approach to tackling this issue and this problem, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So Laura, welcome to Security and Compliance Weekly.
Thank you so much, Jeff. I appreciate it. Pleasure to be here.
Great. Hey, you have a quite extensive bio, and in fact, you didn't necessarily grow up in cybersecurity in terms of your career path. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself just to start off, and how you ended up where you are today in terms of this vision for tackling the skills and diversity gap in our industry?
Sure, thank you. So I went in the Army right after high school, and I knew that's where I wanted to go. I actually thought about getting into the technology field at the time, but I became an administrator. It was the needs of the Army. I served active duty for 21 years. Right after I retired from the Army, I went to work for a global consulting firm, and I was on a number of different assignments over the 10 years. And the latter part of my career, I would say into probably year 4 or so, as a global consultant, I was placed on projects that really touched security, it touched technology. Very first project I was on dealt with making sure that physical security and logistical security, cybersecurity, were integrated. And so that began my career and really a passion for the technology and cybersecurity field. And at the time, I was a quality manager, which was I would call it my major. I elected for a minor and I chose risk management. I thought they were a complement one to the other, and that just naturally evolved into the cybersecurity sector.
Yeah, we've noticed that there's some sort of corollary between risk and security somehow.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of risk that goes on with security, absolutely.
hmm Great. Hey, one question that we ask all of our guests, and this is sort of a theme of all of our shows in general, but because we're focused on security and compliance, I'm curious to get your take on sort of where you fall in what we call the security versus compliance spectrum. Basically what I'm asking is, what is your take on security and compliance, and how the two are the same or different, or how they interact with one another?
Sure, absolutely. And so if we think about areas within an organization, a department, every organization should really focus on cybersecurity because, after all, data is the new gold. And so, in protecting information, whether it's person identifiable information known as PII, or health information, if you're in the healthcare field or have those sorts of records, or payment cards, if your organization accepts credit cards, those sorts of types of data points. Cybersecurity is that discipline that will help protect that information. So when we talk about compliance, if we were to think about, for example, we need to protect a certain number of records, we would look at what do we need to put in place to be sure that people are actually protecting those records. So that's where we would look at writing policy. That's where we would have checks to make sure that those policies are adhered to. That's where we would put training in place so people know how to appropriately protect those records, as an example. And that arm of that particular discipline or those activities would be the compliance part of cybersecurity, as an example.
Interesting. Great. Thank you. I'm curious, because our topic in general today is sort of the skills shortage and the difficulty that there has been historically in African Americans in particular, but in general the lack of diversity in our career field. And my initial thought, because we are a security and compliance focused show, is, and maybe you don't have to answer this right away, but maybe this can sort of be the backdrop of our conversation. But is there a difference in terms of pursuing career fields in terms of what we're defining as security versus what we're defining as compliance? Is it the same type of skill set that's needed to break into either of these two areas of our overall industry? Just sort of keep that in mind as a backdrop. But I don't know if you have any initial thoughts on, assuming people get the requisite training and interest, do you pursue a field in the security side of things or the compliance side of things, or do you start one way and go the other, vice versa? What are your initial thoughts on that?
Yeah, so it's really a matter of where you'd like to focus. Cybersecurity is, again, in and of itself is a discipline. So if we think in terms of information assurance, information technology, getting more into device management and the use of technology, cybersecurity is its own distinct and separate functional area. And so with working through cybersecurity, there are a number of disciplines that come together to make cybersecurity possible. So you'll have expertise around governance. That is the policy setting and the adherence to the policies. You have risk managers that will get involved in understanding cyber risk and quantifying risk, coming up with risk scenarios and what are some mitigation strategies that can be put in place to reduce an organization's risk exposure. You also have the compliance arms to make sure that, so for example, auditing your internal auditors, your external auditors, any of your experts that are in the organization that execute on various types of assessments that need to be accomplished, and making sure there's remediation activities that happen if there are any gaps that surface from those assessments. So that would be the compliance, I would say, arms of cybersecurity. You have your cybersecurity analysts, folks that will work and take a deeper dive into what's happening with, say, the network engineers. There's a lot of different focus areas for cybersecurity analysts, but those are the folks then that would look holistically and perform some level of analytics around understanding what the data are telling us to tell the story of what's happening with cybersecurity. And then you have your senior folks in cybersecurity, your chief information security officers, your CISOs or CISOs, as some folks refer to them, that spearhead this whole security sector. And then you have your chief security officers, which could be physical and cybersecurity, having both disciplines under their purview. So there are a number of different levels of expertise and types of expertise that come together to make cybersecurity effective and make it possible altogether.
Okay. Scott, do you have any initial questions?
Well,
at this point,
not so much initial questions, but I want to take things in a down a different rabbit hole, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Laura, thank you for joining us, by the way. We love fresh approaches to how all of this is done, and you certainly have a fresh approach. The rabbit hole that I want to go down, though, is I want to focus on orienting younger children to cyber and tech, right? How did you come up with the idea of what the cyber guy and the techie guy managing the risk of being online? How did you come up with that idea? What was the driver behind it? Can you dive a little bit into that, please?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for that. And so as I began to think about the lack of diversity, African Americans specifically in the corporate sector, pick an organization. It's just a phenomena that is a reality. And so as I began to think about this phenomena, I thought, and also with working with other professionals and looking at research, one reason for that lack of diversity is what we would term a leaky pipeline. And that is, if we have students in college and they graduate and they go into these career fields, that's a pipeline. But if you have, and what we found is that we have African Americans that are in college, they tend to look to their left and their right and maybe don't see others who in numbers are there to support and help and be a support to one another. They tend to matriculate out or fall by the wayside, if you will, that leaky pipeline effect. And so they end up in other disciplines, business and just other disciplines, rather than continuing, because it's lonely. It can get very lonely. And so that's one phenomenon that happens. So I began to look at the high school level. There is a focus there. There are a lot of programs that are designed to help get our high school students into robotics and cobotics and artificial intelligence and just learn more about different technologies.
Right.
I look at middle school as well. There are some more programs there, less so than I would say they're high schoolers, but they're there. And then I look at elementary school. And specifically, again, back to the focus on African Americans and continuing to progress through the ranks, if you will, with cybersecurity and technology. Not so much. Some there, but not so much. So I thought, how can I bring my experiences, my skills, my learnings, my teachings, my passion, really, and focus some of that energy on children to get them interested. So I thought, why not, in some spare time that I have, that I would create this book.
Right.
And I picked a couple of little characters here and worked with an illustrator to design the characters. But this is Tekkie Guy, and she is Cyber Kai. Cyber Kai and Tekkie Guy, this particular book manages the risk of being online.
Mm-hmm.
They have conversations and they use real world terms in these books that really help children to become more appropriately informed. Children are already very comfortable, not just African American children, all children. A majority of children who are using these devices and connected to the World Wide Web are very comfortable using technology, but are they appropriately informed? So to keep them safe today and being a cyber risk manager, I started with managing the risk of being online. Yeah, and so I've also recently developed sort of it's a workbook as a complement to the book, and that's something I'm going to do for every series. The next series will be around cyberbullying and social media, and I'll continue from there. But I want to get kids not only interested, but appropriately informed, help keep them safe, give them some point to consider, and also to begin to use some of these real world terms that we use. And if we can help shape their thinking, then we can help keep them safe, and we can also help to create this pipeline and strengthen this pipeline.
Right. So what you're really doing, and I think this is absolutely wonderful, is that you're starting the cadence about cyber, about risk, about that association early, right? The cadence in that the terms that are being used, how it's relayed to kids, right? And really prepping them for trying to defend themselves in a new digital era, correct?
Absolutely. And yes, and looking forward, but also today, what are some of the rules? So what I do is I reinforce some of those rules that the parents and the teachers are already telling them. But surprisingly, a lot of times what I'm finding is that because parents and teachers don't work in the cybersecurity industry necessarily expressly, there may be some points that are lacking. And so what I'm hoping to do is help not only have the conversation, but help fill the gap. And so for some things that they may not be thinking about, I want to offer some of those learning points as discussion points, and to also be, again, that extra voice, because sometimes children respond better to hearing some of these same rules or even new rules from different people and using different formats.
Hey, Laura, real quick, just out of curiosity, can you show us what the inside of the book looks like? Like, is it a graphic novel or is it a book with illustrations? I'm just curious.
Graphic novel, but this is the cover. So
Right.
Tekkie Guy, and then I go into just some dedications, and let me pull this down just a little bit here. Okay.
So it's a children's book.
Yeah, it is a children's book. It's a children's book. On a lot of pages, you'll see this light bulb that goes off, and there are keywords that are highlighted in red. And my first word is online. Kids hear that a lot. They kind of know what it means, but I want to offer sort of a childlike definition where I can, or at least the definition that allows an adult to have a conversation with the child to strengthen that understanding. So here, online: connection to other computers using the internet. So again, using the word online. So
Right.
here's Tekkie Guy, and I talk a bit about, hi, I'm Tekkie Guy. I see you've met my friend Cyber Kai, and we go into more information here. And another keyword is technology. So how have
You know, there's a
technology?
large part of me that right now wants to go get my blanket out of my cubby hole and get my cookie and milk and sit on the floor and just have you read the book to me.
Yeah. So I won't read the whole thing, but definitely. So the main points about the book is that I do introduce real world terms. I do offer definitions. I talk about risk. I do also offer some rules that kids have probably heard. If not, I want them to hear them. I've also purposed this a little bit as a workbook. So there's areas where they can write in their own rules or the rules they're learning from their parents and teachers. Again, keyword cyberspace. What does cyberspace mean? I give a definition. And again, we go here to the various rules. So some rules: only visit websites that are appropriate. Our parents and teachers help us with this. Tell parents if anything seems wrong when online. Never chat online with strangers and never agree to meet with anyone in person. So just some of these basic rules that will help children stay safe today, help them stay safer today, to give them additional considerations as their parents and teachers and other caring adults are helping them along their journey, but also to, again, think about the future and how can some of what they're interested in today help shape their future. Not every child will go into cybersecurity or technology. In fact, there's a statistic out now that says that if you take 3 children and give them a job today, 2 of those jobs will not exist by the time they actually do enter into the job market. And 2 of those jobs have not yet been created. And so they will deal with cybersecurity and technology on some level. And so a lot of elementary schools, we use flashcards back in our day, but they call them sight words, SITE. But I've repurposed that and I've given them SY-IT, cyber IT, sight words. And so if they like, they can cut these out. But it's, again, back to the terms and definitions to help their learning, just like regular flashcards. And then also with my activity book, again, a complimentary book. But it's some of the things you would expect to see in a workbook. There's areas to journal. Do you know what the word risk means? And talk to your parents about it. What does risk mean to you? It's good to talk about it. I have word searches. I have matching the words to the definitions. So let's talk about some rules. Give a thumbs up or a thumbs down. The crossword puzzles where you go and do the word searches and so forth. So a lot of different activities in this book. What do these icons mean? So it's really reinforcement for the children and a good way for them to learn and be more involved. And again, these can be used in workshops. They can be used at home, just one-on-one or with other siblings and children. And so that's really what I wanted to achieve in beginning to write these children's books.
Well, that's fantastic. I'll let you jump in a second, Scott, but I just want to comment. I've got grown-up, corporate customers that I think would benefit from a workbook and a storybook like this. I mean, I know it's written for children, but I know a lot of people that would eat this up and they might actually learn something. Go ahead, Scott.
I was going to say something along the same sentiment. Laura, what age demographic is this book aimed at? Either age demographic or grade demographic?
Yeah, so I would say somewhere around first grade.
Okay.
Around, I would say 6th, 7th grade. As we get older, of course, this is written in more of an elementary fashion because I wanted it to be understandable, but the concepts are really what are important. Because I think with that entire age range, it's really about the discussion and it's about helping the children have a deeper understanding of what we're conveying here.
Okay. With the people that have purchased the book and or the workbook, right? What kind of feedback have you been getting as far as the receptiveness goes with the kids that they've introduced this to?
So, a couple of points. One point of feedback is that I've not heard anything negative. So, what I have heard from one parent was that I do need to read it to my child to help them understand it, which is great because that's kind of what I want, anyways. I want the parents to get more involved as well, and teachers and so forth. Another point was that if you look at this little girl, I have what we call locks, and I wanted her to have the same type of hair. It's a very minute point, but it is about understanding that you can be what you see.
Right,
And so
diversity in culture. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And I wanted these characters the children to be able to see themselves in these characters. So that was important to me as I was helping to design these characters. Another point of feedback that I gotten that was really surprising to me is that the adults actually said that they were learning from these books. And it's interesting because as I began to think about writing these books early on, I thought, these are kind of simple and I don't know what type of reception I'll get, but I said I'm going to trust this process. And I think that this is a topic that needs to be talked about, cybersecurity and technology, with children at a younger age. So I'm going to trust this process and I'm going to move forward. And I'll be honest with you, I am so glad that I did, because the feedback that I've gotten from people that I've worked with, that have read the book, that have gone through the book, has been really, really positive, especially from the adults. And
So
I
you're
know it's
so you're saying I can't hand this book to an intern, right?
you could absolutely hand it to an intern. Good. And the
Uh,
important, yeah, go ahead.
no. Please go ahead. I interrupted you.
No, that's okay. I was just going to say that I think the important thing, again, it's about the concepts. And so when I talk about even the workbook, I have a couple of pages in the workbook where I'm introducing careers. Now, kids may not be thinking about technology and cybersecurity and working in the field in the second grade. But I think it's important for them to understand that these are professions. And you too can think about what you can do later on. And it also helps the parents. So everything in moderation, right? But if we see Timmy playing video games and he just has this passion for video games, what is it about gaming that Timmy loves? Is it the competition or is it the graphics? Or is his mind really saying, I wonder how all this works? So is he interested possibly in learning to code, learning to program, learning to develop games? What is it about the interest that these kids are showing right now that a parent could possibly take and hone for the future? Because again, we're in the digital era and it's going nowhere. We still want the doctors and the lawyers, and we as parents, grandparents, teachers, and other guardians want the best for our children. But again, everyone won't go into cyber and technology, but cyber and technology will touch everyone's world, so just as it does today. Unless you're living very, very remotely and off the grid, it's going to touch you. So you'll see here where I talk about this particular page talks about a cyber risk manager. Because again, there's another one that talks about a chief information security officer. I want them to know that these are real professions that they can think about, put it in the back of their minds. They're not making a career decision today, but I
Right.
want them to know that this is available to them in the future. And so I give a little bit about a cyber risk manager. Cyber risk managers often work with chief risk officers to help people understand how to use good cybersecurity practices at work. Companies want to make sure that information is safe from people who should not have it. That is a big part of managing cybersecurity risk. Being a cybersecurity risk manager is an important job that you can learn more about doing. Are you interested in learning more? And then there's a little space for them to write. So I asked the question, what question would you ask a cyber risk manager about cybersecurity? So I want to be thought provoking. I want to be a bit entertaining. but I want them to learn. I want to help them expand how they think about things.
That's absolutely wonderful. Where can we go to be able to find this? Is it hosted on your website, STEMulateCyberMinds.com?
It is. That is Stimulate, as in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. So STEMulateCyberMinds.com.
That's great. I love what you've done in terms of, the agenda is to try to turn young people on to the possibilities of a certain types of career, but it's not the full frontal assault. It's very subtle. You're trying to normalize them on, people that look like me do this kind of stuff. I think that's really cool. I think there's a huge benefit. You have an untapped market in terms of company employee awareness programs here. I don't know if you've realized that or not yet. But I really think there is something here to build on. You mentioned the second book, what the topic is going to be. Can you give us a forecast very briefly on, what's your vision for the series of books? First, second, third. How far out have you thought about this?
Yeah, so I have the first three topics set. So I've written the first, which again is managing the risk of being online. Because to me, again, not just because I'm a cybersecurity risk manager, but also because understanding risk while being online is foundational to everything. It's about safety. It is about security. So the next book, I want to deal with cyberbullying. The reason I want to deal with cyberbullying is because I went in October during Cybersecurity Awareness Month, and I was invited in to speak to a group of children, elementary age children, and they wanted me to talk about my book and just have about a 45-minute conversation, question and answer period, and we did that. But the conversation kept going back to cyberbullying. And it was very challenging for some of the kids, and it was very heartfelt, the conversations that some of them wanted to have. And so I know that that's an area that I need to help address. And right now, again, the target audience for these books, if you will, target audience, is elementary school. But I've also been asked by parents of high school and middle school age children to youth to write books for their level as well. So the next book will be about cyberbullying. And so from there, we need to talk about social media, because that's where a lot of the cyberbullying happens. But there's also, again, the chat rooms to deal with. There's the posting of photos to deal with. There's the clicking of links to deal with. So those will be the first three sets of books. And I'd like to bundle these. So what I consider that to be a part of is the safety and security series. So you'll see that on the workbooks. So that's how I will identify the different bundles that I will put together for the children. There's an interesting point that you made earlier, Jeff. You talked about this being good for organizations, the people of various organizations. You made an important point, because one of the other benefits of a book like this is, while we have our children online at home doing homework, doing things innocently, watching YouTube videos, whatever sorts of movies or games or things that they're playing online, there are all these pop-up ads, pop-up boxes, chat boxes. Some of these links are malicious. Some of these links are intended for the bad guys, the threat actors, to get onto the network. If they can get onto the home network, all they have to do is sit and listen, if you will. They just sit and wait. They don't always act right away. Maybe they're sifting credit card information. Maybe they're sifting personal information for identity theft. Maybe they're looking for the opportunity to get onto the network through that child who has clicked a link. And then the parent then can forward an email unknowingly to their work email. And now that bad actor is able to get onto the corporate network. So it's important for us to have these conversations with our children, not only to keep ourselves safe and secure at home, but also as an extension to how we would operate in the corporate sector.
Super. Hey, this has been fun and fascinating, and I am looking forward to hopefully getting my hands on a copy of this book and the workbook. I also have a couple daughters that are school teachers. One is actually an elementary school math teacher, so I would love to talk to you offline, Laura, about getting her your material and working with her to building your book into a unit that she teaches. But if you go to our listeners, if you go to the wiki, our show notes, the website is out there, www.stimulatecyberminds.com, if you want to learn more about this book. Laura, thank you so much for sharing with us today. A fascinating and interesting topic and adventure that you've embarked on.
Yeah,
I appreciate your time.
Yes,
with that, thank you. With that, we'll take a quick break, and we'll come back with security and compliance news of the week.